Welcome to The Authority File, the podcast where you'll hear conversations with academic librarians, technologists, researchers, and authors whose work is laying the foundation for higher education's future. I'm Bill Mickey, your host and the editorial director at Choice. In this four-part series, which is brought to you with support from Gale, I'm excited to be joined by Barbie Keiser, president of Barbie Keiser, Inc. Barbie is an information resources management consultant and a longtime industry watcher, and for more than 30 years, she's helped library leaders maximize the latest developments in information products and services. Barbie joins us to discuss the latest developments in scholarly communications. There are a variety of market forces that are keeping the field in a state of perpetual change. New tech and new policies are affecting every stage of the scholarly communications lifecycle, from the very beginnings of a research project all the way through to its publication and use by others. In this first episode, we're introduced to Barbie and we talk about how the components of scholarly communications, last defined by ACRL in 2003, have changed and introduced new opportunities for academic libraries. Okay, welcome to the program, Barbie.
Thanks so much for having me.
Sure. So why don't we begin with some introductions? Can you tell us about yourself? I'm especially curious about your career arc.
Yeah. Well, throughout my career, when I've been asked what I do, I tell people that I'm a librarian, and I didn't always work in a traditional library setting.
Mm-hmm.
They always say, you're not a librarian based on what I know about you, but, yeah, I'm a librarian. I began my career as a special librarian working in Fortune 100 companies,
Mm-hmm.
doing research on markets and industries and companies for potential investment or acquisition. And in the beginning, that meant subscribing to journals, reading them cover to cover, photocopying, clipping, putting them into a file. Now, for people who are just in college now, they're saying, "What is that?" They have file folders on their desktop. We did not. But all of this material was gathered and using my library skills to organize the file folders and update the material and circulate it to the people who needed to see that information in support of their work. Think about it as weekly alerts, so to
Mm-hmm.
speak. So the next stage, when databases became a little bit more widely available and used, I brought these databases into the organization. And as they became more user friendly, I advised which databases should be used, how they should be used. And I work to train and assist others in using them effectively. And so far, that's pretty standard library fare.
Right.
When my company's headquarters moved to another state, I decided to go out on my own and with several colleagues wrote a book called MLS, Marketing Library Services. And suddenly organizations around the world said, could you come here and do a workshop for us? And so I began going into other countries and doing these workshops. And around that time, information brokering was gaining traction. So I no longer wanted to do the research, but I wanted to help others learn how to do it. So I became what was known as an information resources management consultant. I don't know if that's standard or not, but that's what I called myself. And I thought I was going to work with startups. So they came in with this clean slate, and I was going to recommend what to buy, how to gain access to the resources they need, build research capacity, and move on.
Mm-hmm.
But what happened, like never proceeds is the way you think it should be, and careers take twists and turns, and huge global corporations started coming to me saying, I know we have something. It's just not what I need or what I ought to have or what you described at this conference or in this publication. So can you help us?
Right.
And therefore, my work became re-engineering libraries or information centers. And I worked for a range of corporations and not-for-profits and academic institutions and government agencies to make them see what was possible and how to get from whatever they had to wherever they wanted to go. And I think that's the most important thing. It's getting people from A to Z with small incremental steps. That's really the key. And each entity, the goal was different. So that's kind of what made it so exciting.
Mm-hmm.
And then in the 2000s, I started teaching competitive intelligence and knowledge management, putting all that I had learned through the years. I taught in the IS concentration for Johns Hopkins MBA program and for the College of Communications and Information at the University of Kentucky. So it's the LIS ICT track.
Right.
And now I'm winding down my consultancy, working part-time reference and instruction librarian, back to my roots, so to speak,
Yep.
at Nova Community College in Virginia. And I am enjoying every minute of it.
Oh, that's fantastic. That's great. That's what a great explanation. And it kind of segues perfectly into like the subject of our discussion, which is scholarly communications. So I want to run this by you. I'm going to read kind of a bit of a long quote, but ACRL last defined scholarly communications back in 2003, defining it as, quote, the system through which research and other scholarly writings are created, evaluated for quality, disseminated to the scholarly community, and preserved for future use. The system includes both formal means of communication, such as publication in peer-reviewed journals, and informed channels, such as electronic listservs. Now, given how you just talked about your career and how, the sort of market around you evolved, which kind of caused you, it sounds like, to evolve your own services to it. I'm wondering how you might update that definition, or, in other words, what are some of the ways the components of the scholarly communication cycle might have changed in the last, say, 20 years?
To me, that definition is so linear, and we know the process is never so logical.
Yeah.
Uh, so, in fact, to use your wording, I think every component has changed during my career as a librarian. I'm pretty old now. So, it's not only what was done and how, but by whom. And this continues to evolve.
Yeah.
So, this is why I think libraries are the right people to be in this mix. Scholars concentrate on their research interests, and librarians watch how sources of information, how tools, how technologies, how techniques for acquiring and using those sources and skills change and evolve.
Hmm.
So we're the expert at solving those niggling problems that researchers who are now told, oh, you have all these tools available, go to it.
Hmm.
We can now say, we have to figure out which to choose, how to make them more comfortable using them, how to know when not to use them and to come to us. And we are the kings and queens of workarounds. So nothing is impossible. And I think that that's the way we're going to work in the future.
Excellent. Um, and then I'm wondering, you mentioned sort of the librarian sort of role in this. Can you provide a little bit more of an overview of how those changes in scholarly communication have inspired changes in library services? How would you break that down into some of the key areas?
Well, change is not the new normal. It's been part of library work since, well, forever. We're resilient and adapt to new change more easily than almost any institution I've seen. This includes changes in the resources that are available for discovery
Hmm.
and the global dissemination of research. That's been the two major changes: the sheer amount of material that's available and the types of material and where it comes from. We don't always understand the fast paced changes to the modern scholarly communications ecosystem with preprints and working papers and sites that monitor the revisions and the research. So, how can a research scientist who hasn't been concentrating on this really keep up with it all? And that's where the scholarly communication blogs and the workshops and the research guides and support that we provide come into play.
Hmm.
The library's role is as a steward for archiving material in institutional repositories, It was clear that IT couldn't be the only people to handle that kind of thing. They just didn't
Right.
understand the intricate
Hmm.
nature of this. So it's also providing research data services to researchers. And that's a relatively new aspect of librarianship, and not everybody is comfortable with that. But we're
Absolutely.
trying to get more comfortable with it. So that's really where I think we're playing a role. I think that there are some societal changes that are occurring that affect everything that librarians do. And probably includes social media.
Hmm.
It includes teamwork or collaboration. And it includes, I'd say, eliminating boundaries or barriers
Hmm.
to those collaborations. So we think about social media in our private lives, and we need to engage in our professional lives as well. And there are newer platforms integrating conversations into the publication so that we can group things not only by relevancy or date or project, to allow scholars to maintain a dialogue with those conducting related research and identifying future collaborators or authors. And within those platforms, we can discern the institutions interested in funding projects of a similar nature. In terms of teamwork and collaborations, we know that teamwork is prized, and research is improved when researchers work together rather than in isolation.
Right.
So if we think about libraries only work as teams, where we pull together, we work with other libraries on our campuses, on other campuses, within our, whether it's consortia, maybe, we look for people who can help us and add value to other skills that we don't have.
Hmm.
And that collaborative approach extends to the beyond the individual department. So eliminating barriers means interdisciplinary teamwork. It means institutions working together. And it means that this affects everything that the library does. I think about Susan Berkman at Nova Southeastern, who has a power publishing day at their institution. And it used to be only for people who are at that institution. And now it's open to the public. And our job is not only to bolster the research of our institutions, but make the quality of research better wherever we can.
Hmm.
We can think about this in terms of tools that are available to us. So we used to have scientific symposia on each of our campuses, but now we can use Cassini to make research seminars available to anyone, anywhere, anytime. I can think of a few things that I'd like to have in that kind of vein. So if you think about hospital grand rounds that are recorded institution by institution, why don't we have a platform where everybody could benefit from those archived recordings? And I think that that's the next piece that we have to get somebody to come in on and develop.
Yeah.
But there are these opportunities.
Hmm. Yeah, no, I love that idea. So I'm glad you brought up sort of that the breaking down of the silos and the idea of collaboration, and also the fact that you wrote the book on marketing library services. So I'm wondering, you know, in a previous conversation, you've noted that librarians are quick to recognize change and they adapt accordingly, but it's not always noticed, by the broader academic community. And I'm wondering what you might think accounts for that.
Well, partly it's our fault. I don't like to say that, but
Well,
we always do a lot for people.
yeah.
Customer service is number one, no matter how difficult the task we take on, we deliver. We never tell people how hard it was, how much time and effort it took. Um, I still hear librarians say, we need to hire a librarian with marketing skills.
Hmm.
And there's nothing magical about marketing. We do it every day in our dress and all sorts of ways. So, what I do think many libraries need is to think more strategically about their products and services. Too often, they've marketed the databases that vendors have delivered to them instead of getting people to understand here are the ways in which we add value to the things that we purchase.
Mm-hmm.
And so getting people to use the databases is a vendor's role. Getting those on your campus to appreciate the value that you add to the products is a librarian's role. Don't tell me what you have, tell me what you can do to make the researcher's life easier. That means you understand every aspect of what they do and you cut the time or the hassle it takes to do it. And that's what makes you valuable to your organization. I think one of the benefits of the pandemic was that people managed workarounds for everything.
Mm.
We did it for our shopping, for our cooking, everything. And why do we think that people are going to come back into the library the way they did before? They managed their research workarounds. And new tools came out to
Right.
help them do that.
Right.
So we want to say, we understand that daily, weekly interaction, and we've got to substitute that. If they're not coming to us, how do we go to them? And how do we become a part of their work so that as a corporate librarian, I spent a lot of time walking the halls. Nobody was going to call me.
Right.
So talking to people, having coffee with colleagues, checking in on projects, we need to develop the equivalent for the world in which we work today. And there are ways to keep track of faculty interests and projects, both current and future. And there are always ways that we can find out what's keeping them awake and helping them resolve those issues.
You just heard from Barbie Keiser. Barbie is president of Barbie Keiser Inc. and an information resources management consultant. Join us next week as we discuss the broader market forces impacting scholarly communications, the way platform vendors, academic publishers, and other educational tech companies have adapted, as well as how authorship and research practices are evolving. This 4-part series is brought to you with support from Gale. As always, underwriting opportunities for the Authority File podcast are directed by Choice's advertising manager, Pam Marino, and all of our episodes are produced and edited by Choice's digital media producer, Sabrina Kofer, with support from digital media assistant, Ashley Roy. That's all for this week. Thanks for joining us.